You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The house was buzzing with noise, the familiar hum of family chatter filling the air. It was Thanksgiving, and 10 of us had gathered at Jake's place for the big meal. Loud, messy, and exactly how I expected it. The table was piled high with turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and more side dishes than anyone could ever need. It was easy to let the food and the wine do their work, to sink into the warmth of the room, the laughter, the comfort of being surrounded by family. Kira sat across from me, looking perfect as always. Her golden hair framed her face in a way that made it hard to look away. But her eyes, they were different. Cold, even when she smiled. Her polished look was a facade. Underneath, there was a tightness I couldn't ignore. I reached for the wine, trying to steady myself, but I knew what was coming. "So, honey," Kira said, her voice dripping with sweetness, "how's the sex life been lately? Any improvements?" She shot me a grin, her eyes scanning the table for reactions. The others burst into laughter, clearly enjoying the joke. Jake clapped his hands. "Oh man, you're killing us, Kira!" But I didn't laugh, not even close. My hand tightened around my glass, and I forced myself to keep my face neutral. Kira's eyes flickered briefly with uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with another charming smile. "Just kidding," she added, her voice turning a little too sweet. "You know I love you, babe." I smiled back, just a little, a movement that didn't reach my eyes. It unsettled her. I could see it. She wasn't used to not getting the reaction she wanted. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of half-hearted jokes, the clinking of silverware, and more than enough food to make you sick. Kira kept talking, mostly about work, how the networking group was going, how she was so over the city. But her words didn't land. My mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking back to that late-night text, the one that set everything in motion. Still thinking about that kiss. That was months ago, and it hadn't been a mistake, not a chance. Everything had been building toward this moment, and tonight, that final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. I didn't need to say a word. I didn't need to cause a scene. I had everything I needed. The weeks after Thanksgiving felt different, like I was standing outside of my own life, watching it through a window. Kira's behavior had shifted subtly but noticeably. At first, I didn't think much of it. People change, especially after a few years in a marriage. But then it started to eat at me. She started going to the gym in the mornings before work. At first, I thought it was a good sign. She was finally doing something for herself, taking care of her health. But the hours were weird, always too early, then long stretches of time where she'd be unreachable. The odd thing was, she didn't talk about it. She didn't mention the classes she was taking, the new routines, or the instructors she liked. I shrugged it off for a while, thinking maybe she just didn't feel like talking about it. But then there were the errands. She'd leave the house in the middle of the day, disappearing for hours. I'd ask where she'd been, and she'd give some vague answer about picking up supplies for a work project, or running an errand for a friend. Never anything specific. And sometimes she'd come home with bags that didn't match up with what she told me. It didn't make sense. Then there were the moods. She'd be distant, a little short with me. And it wasn't the kind of short that you could talk through. It was the kind of short that made me feel like I wasn't even in the room with her, like I didn't belong in the space we shared. I wanted to confront her, to ask her what the hell was going on. But I didn't. I just watched. I logged the inconsistencies in my head, watched the patterns emerge. Something wasn't adding up, and I needed to be sure before I said anything. One night, I found an old laptop of ours, tucked away in the closet. It hadn't been used in months, maybe even longer. It was mostly a relic of the time before everything started to shift. I thought it was worth a shot. I connected it to the Wi-Fi, trying not to make a sound as the device powered up. When it finally loaded, I logged into the cloud account we used to share. Messages and photos began to stream in almost immediately. Most of it was old, mundane stuff. Random photos of family events, vacation pics, some work emails. But then came the new stuff. Her texts. Vague at first, but unmistakable in what they implied. She had been texting someone named Aiden. Business connection, she'd called him in the messages. Someone from her networking group. I scrolled through the conversations, reading each word, each line. They were careful, cautious, like she was trying not to give too much away. But it was enough. The way they talked to each other, It was clear this wasn't just about business. There were too many inside jokes, too much familiarity. They'd met for coffee a couple of times, gone to dinners. She'd even sent a photo of herself, one of those gym selfies that had become so popular lately, with a message that read, "This is for you. Let me know what you think I didn't know how to feel." Anger wasn't the first emotion that hit me. It was more like I was pulling back, stepping farther away from everything. I wasn't surprised, not really. But the thought that Kira had built an entire life with him, that she'd been escaping into this other world for months, felt different. It wasn't just cheating. It was a fantasy she had created, one where she could be someone else, someone without the baggage of our marriage. I was the anchor, dragging her down into reality. She had wanted something more. I kept scrolling. Her messages referenced how much time they'd spent together. Days, weekends. She talked about trips she was planning, places to visit. Aiden, she said, would be joining her on one of those trips. She didn't specify where, just that he was the perfect travel companion and that they'd talk about it soon. That was when I started to get a clear picture of what this was. She had created a separate life for herself with Aiden, a life that didn't involve me. No, worse. It was a life that didn't even need me. I wasn't just an afterthought in her day-to-day existence. I was a placeholder. That hit harder than I expected. I didn't shut the laptop down immediately. I let the images and the messages pour in. Each one felt like a small fracture in the foundation of everything I thought we had built. I kept reading, like I was collecting evidence for something, though I wasn't sure what yet. I needed to know how deep this went. I needed to understand how far she had gone, and why. There was something chilling in the way she talked about him, almost like she was falling for him. There were even pictures of him. Just a few, nothing overtly intimate, but enough to make it clear. He was tall, dark-haired, handsome in that polished way that she always claimed she wasn't interested in. Yet here he was, a fixture in her messages, in her life. I knew then. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't a bad decision. This was something she had been building, layer by layer, until it had become her escape. She didn't just want another man. She wanted another life. And Aiden, he was the doorway. I closed the laptop and stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't feel rage. I felt quiet. A kind of calm that I hadn't known in months. This was it. This was what I had been waiting for. And now I knew exactly what I was going to do. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Everything had a pattern. I'd find a receipt tucked away in her purse for a dinner at a restaurant she always claimed to hate. Something too fancy or too heavy, she'd say. But there it was, a receipt for two from the steakhouse on the corner, one we'd been to on our first anniversary. I stared at it for a while. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just something she slipped up on. Then there were the gym sessions. She'd been going regularly, at least that's what she told me, every day without fail. But when I checked her workout app, the one she'd synced with her phone, I saw the patterns didn't line up. There were days where she'd claimed to be at the gym for 2 hours, but the logs didn't show a single class or even a visit. I knew then it wasn't about fitness. It was about creating an alibi, and it wasn't just the gym. I started paying more attention to her phone. There were playlists, things I'd never seen before. One stood out, a playlist titled Hours. I clicked on it, half expecting a mix of songs we'd enjoyed together over the years. But no, it was all stuff I'd never heard. Some of the tracks had that ambient indie vibe that she claimed she didn't care for. But they were all there. Songs Aiden would have liked. Her business connection, the one she kept talking about in the texts. I didn't have to keep guessing. It was clear now. She was living a double life. But I still needed more confirmation, something solid. And that's where Reggie came in. Reggie had been a friend of mine for years. He was a data analyst, but he was more than that. He knew how to dig into digital footprints, how to track things that most people didn't even know were traceable. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. I didn't need to. I told him I was curious about some of Kira's activity, that she'd been acting strangely, and I wanted to know if there were inconsistencies in her digital life. Reggie, being who he was, immediately got to work. It didn't take him long. He found her travel history, trips she'd taken, bookings she'd made. Some were business-related, but others were too well-timed to be coincidental. He found Uber logs that showed her heading to the same locations as Aiden, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the early morning, well before her gym sessions. They'd overlap these trips. They didn't quite match up with her errands or business meetings. It was clear she'd been meeting him, not for work, but for something else. I sat in my living room, staring at the screen as Reggie ran through the details. His voice was calm, professional. "She's been to places she hasn't mentioned," he said, "and they've both been at these spots at the same time. I can give you exact timestamps if you want them." I didn't need timestamps. I already knew what I needed to know. "You're sure?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yeah, man. It's all here. She's been meeting him more than she's let on. You don't need me to tell you what's going on." He was right. I didn't need him to tell me. It was all laid out. Aiden wasn't just some business contact. He was someone Kira had been seeing in secret for months. He was the one filling in the blanks, the one she was escaping to. The worst part, she'd been doing it with the confidence of someone who knew she wasn't going to get caught. But now she was. I didn't feel rage, though. Not like I thought I would. I wasn't furious. I wasn't blindsided. I was calm. The pieces had fallen into place, and all the anger I thought I would feel was just gone. I was ready. That's the only way I could describe it. Ready to move forward. Ready to take control of a situation I hadn't even realized I'd been letting slip through my fingers. Kira had been planning her escape, piece by piece. But now, I had my own plan. It wasn't about confrontation. Not yet. It was about collecting the facts, putting everything into motion. I wasn't going to let her drag me into her mess. I was going to finish this on my terms. It was a few days before Christmas when the call came in. I didn't recognize the number, but something about it made me answer. "Hello? Is this—" The voice on the other end paused, then added, "Is this the husband?" I felt a coldness creep down my spine. It wasn't a question I expected, but it was one I'd been waiting for. "Yes," I said, not even bothering to ask who it was. "I'm Sasha, Aiden's ex-wife." She didn't wait for my response. "Kira invited Aiden to their New Year's Eve party. I'm telling you because you need to watch how they look at each other, the way they always do." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean, how they look at each other?" "Exactly what I said. Pay attention when they're in the same room. She thinks no one notices, but I see it. I've seen it before." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of her words hitting harder than I expected. "And why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not the only one she's playing." Her voice dropped, darker now. "I'm done being quiet. I didn't want to help you, not at first, but I'm sick of it, watching him do to you what he did to me." I waited, letting the silence stretch out. She wanted something. I knew that much. Finally, I asked, "What do you want?" Sasha didn't hesitate. "I want revenge. I want to watch her face when she realizes we've both figured it out." Her laugh was bitter. "But I want more than that. I want her to know it's not just about the affair. It's about everything she's taken for granted." I rubbed my eyes. This wasn't what I expected, but it was exactly what I needed. Someone who knew the game. Someone who wasn't going to play it like I had been. Carefully, quietly. "So, you're not just offering a warning," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You want to make sure she gets what's coming to her." "Exactly," she replied without hesitation. "But not with drama. Not with some big blow-up. It'll be clearer that way. No screaming, no scene, just truth. And she can't run from that." I didn't say anything at first. Sasha was right. A confrontation at that party? It would be too much of a spectacle. Kira would just turn it into one of her games, find a way to deflect. I needed something quieter. Something with no room for escape. "I've been planning something," I said, the idea coming to me as I spoke. "Kira's been hinting at a weekend getaway for her birthday. A cabin up by the lake, something like that. I think that's where it'll happen, just the two of us. No distractions." Sasha was quiet for a moment. I could hear the rustling of what sounded like papers or a folder. Then she spoke again. "That's a good idea. I'll come, but I'll wait. I won't show up until the moment's right. You'll get her to crack, and I'll be there to make sure she knows the full picture." I could hear her control. She had experience with this kind of thing, more than I did at least. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had someone on my side who wasn't just passively watching. Sasha had been through it all with Aiden. She understood what it felt like to be the one left behind. "This won't be easy," I said, feeling a weight settle in my chest. "I don't expect it to be," she replied, "but it'll be clean." I promise. I sat back in my chair after hanging up, feeling the air shift around me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had a plan, more than just a vague hope that things would work themselves out. This was going to be methodical. Kira wasn't going to walk away from this without facing what she'd done. And when it happened, I'd make sure she knew it wasn't just about her affair. It was about everything. The years of subtle lies, the way she'd been so sure I wouldn't notice, the way she assumed I would just keep quiet. The getaway weekend wouldn't just be a birthday trip, it would be the beginning of the end. I booked the cottage by the lake the next day, the one Kira had mentioned once, years ago. It had always been a throwaway comment, something she'd said while flipping through a magazine on a Sunday morning. A place like this would be perfect for a weekend away, she'd mused, never realizing I'd actually remembered. I took my time with the booking. I wanted it to feel like a surprise, something special, something that could be seen as a gesture of trying again. I played the role of the doting husband, making sure everything was perfect. Candles, fresh flowers, the kind of romantic setup she'd always wanted, but I never bothered with. I even packed her favorite wine. The whole thing was staged, but she wouldn't know that. Kira was thrilled when I told her about the surprise. Her eyes lit up, and she leaned in to kiss me, her hands soft on my skin. "I knew you'd come around," she said, grinning. "I knew you'd try again." I smiled back, nodding, letting her believe it. Let her believe this was about us, about fixing things. I didn't feel anything when she kissed me, though. I felt nothing but the weight of the plan hanging over me, pulling everything into focus. She didn't know it yet, but everything was already over. While she packed and got excited, I handled the real details, the things she wouldn't see. I had already changed the locks on the house. The accounts were split. She didn't notice that I'd started the legal process, didn't notice the small but significant moves I was making to make sure nothing of hers stayed. All those years, those hours I'd given her, those quiet nights where I let her lead, they were gone now. I had done everything by the book, just enough to be out, to be done, but without any mess. I thought about that as I sat in the living room, going over the legal documents one last time. Sasha had confirmed she'd be arriving separately, in her own car, just as we'd planned. I had even sent her the cottage details. She would drive in at the exact right time, after Kira and I were settled, and then everything would fall into place. The timing had to be perfect. Sasha knew how to stay silent when it mattered. She'd wait until the moment when Kira would think everything was fine, until she thought she had won again. Then Sasha would arrive, not with noise or drama, but with a folder, a simple folder, just like the one I'd prepared, all the facts laid out. No yelling, no screaming, no broken glass, just the quiet certainty of what had been done, what had been built, and what had been destroyed. I had thought about the chaos, about confronting her in front of family or friends, but I didn't want that. That would be too easy. The truth wasn't supposed to be an explosion. It was supposed to be a quiet thing, the kind of thing that, once revealed, left no room for doubt. Kira had lived in her own fantasy world for so long. She had thought she could play this game without consequences. But she was wrong. As we drove up to the cottage, Kira kept talking about how perfect everything was. How this was just what we needed. She was in her bubble, completely unaware that I had already separated myself from it. The calm was thick in the air, heavy with anticipation. I'd always wondered what it would feel like, taking control, finally putting an end to the game she'd been playing. It wasn't a burst of adrenaline or satisfaction like I'd expected. It was quieter than that. A little empty even, but maybe that was the point. I wasn't angry. I wasn't devastated. I just felt steady, ready. It was like being on the edge of something, watching the world go by, knowing that no matter what happened, it would be over soon. This was the calm before the storm, the last breath before the truth landed. We pulled up to the cottage just as the sun began to dip behind the trees, the golden light spilling over the water. Kira's eyes lit up the moment she saw it. She practically jumped out of the car, hands flying up to her face, shocked at how perfect it all looked. "I can't believe you did this," she said, grinning. "I've been wanting to come back here for so long." I didn't say anything. I just watched her, letting the moment unfold as she took in the setting. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the cottage, the candles already glowing in the windows, the table set for dinner. Her favorite wine was already on the counter, waiting to be opened. She went to work immediately, setting the tone, lighting the candles, turning on the music she liked, filling the air with a soft melody. She danced around the kitchen, humming along, pouring the wine with a flourish, clearly feeling like she'd won somehow. It was easy for her to believe everything was normal, that nothing had changed. I let her, for now. I let her believe the lie just a little longer. I didn't speak as she moved around the room, completely at ease. Instead, I watched. I let her believe I was the husband she wanted me to be, the one she had convinced herself would come back to her, the one who would forget everything and pretend like nothing had happened. Kira set the table, turned on the lights, and even started humming to herself as she poured the wine into glasses. The way she looked at me, that soft smile, like we were going to start fresh, it made me sick, but I didn't react. She walked over to me and took my hands, pulling me into a slow dance. I let her, just for a moment. I didn't resist. I let her hold on to me like I was still the person she thought I was, the person who would forgive and forget. We swayed for a minute, her head on my chest, her body so close to mine I could almost feel the pulse of her heartbeat. It was a twisted thing, to pretend like I didn't know what she'd done, to play the role she expected, to be the good husband for just a little longer. At 7:30, I pulled away, just enough to look at her. She didn't expect it. She didn't know what was coming. "Kira," I said, my voice steady but sharp enough to cut through the moment, "I've got a birthday surprise for you." Her smile softened as she pulled back, confused. "What do you mean? This is already—" I didn't let her finish. I pulled a thick folder from the bag I'd been carrying, setting it down between us on the table. She stared at it for a second, eyebrows knitting in confusion. "What's this?" I didn't say anything at first. I just slid the folder across the table to her, watching as her fingers hesitated before opening it. The first thing she saw was a set of messages. Messages she had sent to Aiden. It wasn't the usual small talk. These were the ones where she'd gotten careless, where she'd been talking about things she shouldn't have, about places she'd been, about how much she was looking forward to our weekend away, how they couldn't wait to see each other again. She flipped through, her eyes scanning faster now, not understanding at first, but then she saw the logs, the receipts, the maps, the places I hadn't known about, the ones she'd visited when she told me she was working late or running errands. Her breathing hitched and her fingers faltered on the pages. She looked up at me then, eyes wide, a forced smile still playing at her lips. This is a joke, right?" Her voice trembled just a little. I shook my head, watching her as she flipped through more of the evidence. "No, not a joke. This is everything." Her eyes darted across the pages, faster now, like she was trying to read and not understand at the same time. The color drained from her face as the weight of it started to settle in. I didn't care about her shock. I didn't care about her disbelief. She had made her choices. Now she had to face them. "You've got 10 minutes, I said, my voice colder than it had ever been. "Then we won't be alone." Her head snapped up, her face draining of color as her eyes flicked from the folder to me. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. She looked like she was about to crumble. 10 minutes, I repeated, my tone unwavering. For a moment, she just stared at the folder, her mouth working but unable to make a sound. And then, it hit her. The full realization. The panic took over. She didn't even try to deny it anymore. Instead, she jumped up, pacing in small circles, hands wringing as she muttered under her breath. This can't be." I stood up too, moving towards the door. "You have 10 minutes, I said one last time, and I left her alone with the truth. The sound of the door opening broke the silence, and I knew without turning around who it was. Sasha stepped in without knocking, just like we'd agreed. The click of her boots on the hardwood floor was sharp, deliberate, and it felt like the last thread of tension was snapping into place. Kira whipped her head around, her face still pale from the shock, her hands trembling as she clutched the folder. The look on her face was a mixture of disbelief and a growing panic that seemed to settle in her eyes. She took a step back, but there was no running from this. Sasha didn't waste any time. She walked straight to the table, dropped her own folder down beside Kira's, and stood there, arms crossed, looking at Kira like she was something beneath her. No greeting, no small talk, just cold, hard silence. Kira glanced between Sasha and me, the weight of everything crashing in on her all at once. I could see her trying to hold on to some shred of composure, but she was unraveling fast. Sasha didn't flinch. "So, this is how it's going, huh?" "You're the other woman. The one who helped Aiden ghost his wife Kira," took a shaky breath, her eyes darting to the folder in front of her. Her mouth opened, but the words came out in a weak stutter. I didn't." Sasha didn't let her finish. "No, you didn't just cheat. You enabled him. You let him drag me through hell. You played along, knowing exactly what was happening." She paused, watching Kira squirm. "What you didn't count on was that someone like me wouldn't let it slide. I'm not letting you walk away from this without facing what you've done." Kira's eyes flickered, trying to piece together a defense, but there was nothing she could pull from the air. "Sasha, it wasn't like that. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." She turned to me, desperate now. "I didn't want any of this to happen. You know how complicated things were between us." Sasha's laugh was sharp, bitter. "Complicated? You knew exactly what you were doing. You think playing the victim is going to make this go away? Number. You made a choice, and now you're going to face it." Kira's fingers tightened around the folder, her knuckles white. I didn't think you'd go this far, Sasha. I didn't think..." "You didn't think?" Sasha cut her off again, her voice deadly calm. "You didn't think I'd find out? You didn't think this was going to bite you in the ass?" Kira opened her mouth again, but Sasha wasn't finished. "You didn't just cheat, Kira. You turned it into entertainment, a game. You wanted the thrill of it, the sneaking around, the secret texts, the weekends away. You didn't care who got hurt. And now, look at you." Kira was quiet, her eyes flickering between Sasha and me, realizing there was no way out. The last of her composure was slipping away like sand through her fingers. I stepped forward then, my voice steady and clear. "You didn't think you'd get caught, did you? You thought you could play both of us, like we wouldn't ever notice." She flinched, and for the first time since we'd started this, I saw real fear in her eyes. "And now," I continued, "you're going to face the music, because what's on those pages isn't just a fling, it's months of lying, cheating, and pretending. You've been living in a fantasy, and now it's over." Sasha and I were a united front now. The silence stretched between us for a moment before Sasha spoke again, her voice low and measured. "You're not the only one who's been keeping records. Aiden may have thought he was in the clear, but he's not. This folder," she gestured to the one on the table, "is for his firm. It's got everything. It's got the receipts, the trips, the time stamps. It's going to make sure he never forgets who he really is." Kira's face went white at the mention of Aiden's firm. What do you mean?" Her voice trembled now, cracks of panic seeping through. "What are you going to do with that?" Sasha's eyes didn't leave Kira's. "I'm going to make sure it gets where it needs to. Just like I'm going to make sure this," she nodded at the folder in front of Kira, "gets to where it belongs. You'll get your punishment, just like he will." I stood still, letting the words settle in. Sasha and I had both played our parts, and now the final piece was falling into place. I turned to Kira, my expression cold. "This is for the divorce court," I said, the words heavier than I expected, but I didn't let myself show any weakness. Kira's hands shook as she reached for the folder, her eyes scanning the pages, her face crumpling as the truth finally hit her. She looked up, her voice a whisper. "You can't do this. You can't just..." Sasha leaned forward, her voice steel. "Oh, I can. And I will." The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Kira had no response left, no excuses to make. The confrontation was over. We had both said what needed to be said, and now nothing could undo what had been done. Sasha left without another word, her footsteps fading down the hall, and I watched Kira crumple into a chair. Her hands still shook, but now it was a different kind of shaking, soft, helpless, like she was unraveling completely. The facade had shattered, and whatever strength she had left drained out of her in that quiet, hollow way that made me feel nothing. She looked up at me, her voice cracking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, letting the silence stretch out, because I already knew what she was going to say. I didn't need to hear it. I didn't need any more explanations or apologies. She had played this game, thinking she could control everything, but now the table had turned. "I need to explain. Please," she repeated, her voice desperate now. "I didn't mean for it to get this far. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted it to end this way. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm, even though every part of me wanted to react. But I didn't. I had already reached the point where the explanations no longer mattered. I pulled the envelope from my jacket and placed it on the table in front of her. The divorce papers. She looked at them, then back at me, confused. "What's this?" I didn't soften my voice. "It's done. You're going to sign them. Tonight." Her eyes widened. "No, you can't. We can fix this. I'll change. I swear. We can fix everything." She reached for my hand, her grip weak and pleading. I pulled my hand back, holding her gaze. "No, Kira. You didn't care how it ended. You just didn't think I'd be the one to end it." The words hit her harder than I intended, but I didn't care. The pity she had for herself was the same pity she thought I didn't see. The same pity she had for her own lies. She stammered, shaking her head in disbelief. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought you'd forgive me. I thought we'd get past this. I cut her off. "It's over. There's nothing to fix. You've already decided what you wanted. You just didn't think there'd be consequences." She stood, the tears welling up in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do anything. Just don't leave me like this." I looked at her for a long moment. The person I had once loved was still standing there, but now she felt like a stranger. It wasn't anger I felt. It wasn't even relief. It was just emptiness. "You've had your chance," I said. "Now I'm taking mine." I turned and walked to the door, not looking back. She didn't say anything else. I could hear her sobbing softly as I stepped out of the cottage, the door clicking shut behind me. But it didn't matter. Nothing she said would change anything now. I checked into the motel down the road, the room small and bare, but it didn't matter. The bed was clean, the sheets fresh. I lay down, staring at the ceiling for a moment before closing my eyes. For the first time in over a year, I felt at peace. I wasn't carrying the weight of her lies, her games, her deceit. I wasn't holding on to any hope anymore. I let myself drift off, the sound of her voice still echoing faintly in my mind. But it didn't stop me from falling into the kind of sleep I hadn't known in months. It was quiet. It was done. The days after everything happened felt strange, like I was living in some suspended moment. Kira tried to reach out, of course. Calls, texts, even emails. Each one more desperate than the last. But I ignored them all. I didn't need her explanations anymore. There was nothing left to say. A few days after I'd left the cottage, her sister messaged me. I hadn't heard from her in months. "You really blindsided her," was all the message said. I didn't respond. What was there to say? That I had finally seen through the illusion she'd built? That I wasn't willing to let her play me any longer? I didn't care what her sister thought. She wasn't the one who'd been lied to, who'd been made to feel small for years. She wasn't the one who'd had to watch as Kira slowly disconnected from reality, pulling further away into her own fantasy with Aiden. Through Sasha, I heard that Aiden had ghosted Kira after everything came out. I didn't feel a rush of satisfaction hearing it, just a cold, flat acknowledgement that he'd done exactly what I expected. He wasn't any better than her, and he sure as hell wasn't the knight in shining armor she'd imagined him to be. His firm had let him go discreetly. That was all she'd gotten from him. Sasha told me, her voice smooth, almost clinical. "Aiden's out. He's not answering her calls anymore. He's gone, just like he did to me." The way she said it made it sound almost like he'd disappeared into thin air. And that was exactly what he'd done. He wasn't some knight. He wasn't a hero. He was just another man who saw Kira as disposable once he had what he wanted. I didn't need to feel sorry for her. I moved into the condo we'd co-owned a week later. It felt like the right thing to do. I had always hated the idea of staying in the house, the one where we'd built so many empty memories. It was easier to let her go. The condo was small, but it was mine now. It felt quieter, the space clearer. I hadn't even bothered unpacking much. I'd gotten rid of most of her stuff already, the things that had cluttered the place for too long. It felt like I was erasing something. And maybe I was. Kira's social circle collapsed just as quickly as her affair had. Through the whispers and the fragments of gossip I caught through Sasha and some of the people I still knew, I learned that the friends she'd confided in, the ones she had vented to about me, about our marriage, had turned on her too. The friends she thought she could count on, they were backing away, cutting ties, just like Aiden had. I didn't feel joy about any of it, though. Not really. There was no celebration in watching her lose everything. I didn't even feel angry anymore. It was all just confirmation of what I had known deep down for a long time. I'd been living in a shadow of what I thought was love. She'd been checking out long before I figured it out. As I settled into my new routine, the quiet felt like freedom. No noise, no more pretending. I wasn't weighed down by her lies, her games, or the constant uncertainty of what she might do next. The space in the condo was empty, but it was empty in the right way. It was mine. I started to rebuild, slowly. There wasn't a rush. I didn't need to find closure right away. That would come when it came. For now, I was content with the quiet, taking it one day at a time, without her in the background anymore, without her shadow over me. It wasn't a fresh start. It was just peace. And peace, for once, was enough. It was a Saturday morning when I saw her. I wasn't looking for her. I didn't even know I was going to the farmer's market until I turned the corner and saw her standing there, a few stalls down, her back slightly hunched as she picked through some tomatoes. She looked different, smaller, older somehow. The vibrancy I remembered from her was gone, replaced by something quieter, thinner. I stood there for a moment, watching her, my hand resting on the edge of the truck. She hadn't noticed me yet, and I wasn't sure I wanted her to. But then, she must have felt it, the shift in the air, something she couldn't ignore. Her head turned slowly, and when her eyes met mine, I saw the freeze in her body, the recognition. The moment when everything she had tried to keep buried came crashing back. For a split second, she looked like she might say something, maybe even apologize, but she didn't. She just stood there, frozen in place, and I nodded once. Not out of anger, not out of anything more than simple acknowledgement. And then I walked on, turning my back to her without another word. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. When I got to the truck, I climbed in, started it up, and turned the music up loud enough to drown out the silence. For the first time in months, I felt no weight pressing down on me. No need to say anything, no need to force any kind of closure, just peace. Kira had once said my old hoodie fit better than hers. I didn't remember her saying it with any real emotion. Just another one of those offhand remarks she made when we were still in the middle of pretending we had something. But I saw it clearly now, the way she was wearing it as if it was the last thing left of me, the last piece of something she thought she could hold on to. I kept driving. The road stretched out ahead of me, empty and quiet. Looking back, I realized something. Kira wasn't drifting away from me. She was eroding what we had, bit by bit, until there was nothing left, and I had let her. I had given her the space, the grace, and the chance to tear it down slowly, silently. I hadn't seen it then, but I saw it now. Now, I had something better than revenge. I had clarity, I had freedom, and that freedom was mine. I wasn't going to give it up for anyone. Not for her, not for anyone who thought they could step into my life and take more than what they deserved. I'd gotten out. I was out. And no matter how she tried to keep reaching, no matter how much she tried to pull me back into her mess, I wasn't going back. I turned up the music even louder, letting it fill the truck, drowning out everything else. It was just me now, just peace, and I wasn't going to give that up for anyone again.